November 10th, the Paramount Theatre, New York City. Bing Crosby was halfway through his set when someone from the crew appeared in the wings, waving frantically. Urgent. Bing saw him but didn't stop singing. He was a professional. You didn't stop a show unless the building was on fire. He finished the song. The audience applauded. Bing smiled, waved, said something charming into the microphone, then walked off stage. The crew member was waiting, his face pale. "Mr. Crosby, you need to call home, right now. It's about your wife." Bing felt his stomach drop. He'd known this call was coming, had been dreading it for weeks, months maybe, but knowing something is coming doesn't make it easier when it arrives. He went to his dressing room, closed the door, picked up the phone, dialed the number he knew by heart. His brother-in-law answered. Larry, Dixie's brother. "Bing, I'm so sorry. She's gone. Dixie passed away about an hour ago." Bing didn't say anything, couldn't, just stood there holding the phone, staring at nothing. "Bing, are you there? I'm here. I'll be on the next flight." He hung up, sat down heavily in the chair, put his face in his hands, but he didn't cry. Bing Crosby didn't cry. Not in front of people, not even alone. He'd learned a long time ago that showing emotion was weakness, and weakness was unacceptable. Dixie Lee Crosby, born Wilma Winifred Wyatt, 40 years old, dead from ovarian cancer. Bing's wife for 18 years, mother of his 4 sons, the woman he'd fallen in love with when they were both young and hungry, and Hollywood was just beginning to notice them. She'd been sick for 2 years. The cancer had started quietly, a pain in her abdomen she'd ignored, because Dixie ignored most things that were wrong with her. By the time the doctors found it, the cancer had spread, too late for surgery, too late for anything except managing the pain and waiting. Bing had known she was dying. Everyone knew. The doctors had been clear. 6 months, maybe a year if she was lucky. That was 18 months ago. Dixie had defied the odds, kept living, kept fighting, but the fight was exhausting, and Dixie was tired. 3 weeks earlier, Bing had been sitting by her hospital bed, St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica. Dixie was thin, so thin her bones showed through her skin. Her hair was mostly gone from the treatments. Her face was gray, but her eyes were still bright, still defiant. "You need to go on tour," she said. Her voice was weak but firm. "I'm not leaving you. Bing, we need the money. The medical bills are drowning us. You have to work. The hell with the money. I'm staying here." Dixie reached out, took his hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Listen to me. I've been dying for 18 months. I could die tomorrow, or I could last another 6 months. Nobody knows. But what we do know is that we have 4 sons who need to eat, who need clothes, who need a future. And that doesn't happen if you sit here watching me waste away. Dixie, go on tour. Make the money. Come back. I'll still be here. I promise." Bing had argued, but Dixie was stubborn, always had been. She'd made him promise, made him swear he'd go, that he'd do the tour, that he'd take care of their boys by doing what he did best, singing. So he'd gone, left on October 15th. A 6-week tour, 62 shows in 33 cities. Good money. Money they desperately needed. The medical bills were astronomical. The house had a second mortgage. Bing's last 3 films had underperformed. They were in debt. Real debt. The kind that keeps you awake at night. Bing had called Dixie every day, sometimes twice a day, from hotel rooms in Chicago, Philadelphia, Boston, Cleveland, Detroit. She always said the same thing. "I'm fine, still here, go sing, make us rich." But her voice got weaker each time. The calls got shorter. Yesterday when he'd called from New York, Dixie had barely been able to speak, just whispered, "I love you, Bing. Don't forget that. Whatever else happens, whatever you think about our marriage, I loved you, always. I love you too. I'll be home in 2 weeks. We'll have Thanksgiving together. You, me, and the boys. That would be nice." Those were the last words they ever said to each other. Now Dixie was dead. And Bing was in a dressing room in New York, hundreds of miles away, exactly where he'd feared he'd be when it happened. He made the arrangements, chartered a plane, would land in Los Angeles around 6 a.m., be home by 7. The funeral would have to wait until he arrived. The boys needed him. Gary was 16. The twins, Dennis and Philip, were 14. Lindsay was 12. They'd just lost their mother. They needed their father. Bing thought about his sons, thought about how he was going to tell them, what he was going to say, how he was going to explain that he'd been in New York singing when their mother died, that he'd chosen his career over being there, that he'd let her die alone, because that's what he'd done. No matter how Dixie had insisted, no matter how she'd made him promise, the truth was that Bing Crosby had been on stage entertaining strangers while his wife took her last breath, and he would carry that guilt for the rest of his life. He thought about their marriage, 18 years. It hadn't been easy. Dixie had been an alcoholic for most of it, started drinking in the late 30s, social drinking at first, Hollywood parties, everyone drank. But Dixie couldn't stop. One drink became 5, 5 became 10. By the mid-40s she was drinking every day, morning, noon and night. Bing had tried everything. Doctors, therapists, rehab facilities, nothing worked. Dixie would get sober for a few months. Then something would trigger her, and she'd start again. The cycle was endless, exhausting, heartbreaking. Bing blamed himself, blamed his career, blamed the fact that he was gone so much, making movies, recording albums, doing radio shows, touring, always working, always away, leaving Dixie alone with 4 young boys and a bottle of bourbon. She'd told him once, during a rare moment of clarity, why she drank. Because I'm lonely. Because you're never here. Because I married America's favorite singer, but what I got was an empty house and bills I can't pay. Bing had tried to change, tried to be home more. But the work kept coming. The money was good. The fame was intoxicating. And Hollywood didn't care if your wife was an alcoholic. They cared if you showed up on set on time and hit your marks. So Bing had kept working, and Dixie had kept drinking, and their marriage had become a strange dance of love and resentment. They cared about each other, deeply, but they couldn't seem to help each other, couldn't fix what was broken. The cancer diagnosis in 1950 had almost been a relief, not because Bing wanted Dixie to die, but because it gave them something concrete to fight, something other than the alcohol. Dixie had stopped drinking when she got sick, not because she wanted to, but because her body couldn't handle it anymore. The treatments made her too nauseous, the pain was too great. For the last 2 years of her life, Dixie had been sober, and in those 2 years Bing had seen glimpses of the woman he'd fallen in love with in 1930. The witty, sharp, beautiful woman who'd been a rising star herself before the alcohol and the marriage and the babies had consumed her life. They'd had good days, days when Dixie felt strong enough to sit in the garden, days when they'd talk about the old times, the early days of their marriage when they were both nobody and everything was possible, days when they'd laugh, actually laugh, something they hadn't done in years. But those days were rare. Most days were hard. Dixie in pain, Bing feeling helpless, the boys confused and scared, watching their mother disappear piece by piece. And now it was over. Dixie was gone, and Bing was getting on a plane to go home and bury his wife and try to explain to his sons why their father hadn't been there when she died. He packed his suitcase, left the theater, didn't tell the promoter, didn't cancel the remaining shows, just left. They'd figure it out, send angry letters, threaten to sue. He didn't care. His wife was dead. The tour could go to hell. The plane ride was long, dark. Bing sat alone in the chartered aircraft, staring out the window at nothing, thinking about everything, about Dixie, about their marriage, about the mistakes he'd made, about the man he should have been and wasn't. He thought about the first time he'd seen her, a speakeasy in Los Angeles. Dixie was singing. Her voice was beautiful, sultry. She wore a red dress, had dark hair and eyes that sparkled when she laughed. Bing had been mesmerized, waited until her set was over, introduced himself. I'm Bing Crosby. I know who you are. You're the guy who sings with Paul Whiteman, and you're the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. She'd laughed. That's a terrible line. It's not a line if it's true. They'd gotten married a year later. Dixie was 21. Bing was 27. They were young and in love and convinced they'd conquer Hollywood together. For a while they did. Dixie got roles in films, small parts but good ones. She was talented, had presence, could have been a star. But then the babies came. Gary in 1933, the twins in 1934, Lindsay in 1938, 4 boys in 5 years. Dixie's career ended before it really began. She'd said it didn't matter, said being a mother was more important. But Bing knew it did matter, knew she resented it, resented him, resented the fact that his career skyrocketed while hers disappeared, that he got to travel the world while she stayed home changing diapers and pretending to be happy. The alcohol had started as self-medication, a way to cope with the loneliness and the disappointment, but it had become its own prison, and Bing hadn't known how to free her. The plane landed at 6:15 a.m. The sun was just coming up. Bing took a car straight to the house, pulled into the driveway, sat there for a moment, staring at the front door, knowing that once he walked through it, everything would be real. Dixie would really be dead, and he'd have to face his sons. He got out of the car, walked to the door, opened it. The house was quiet, dark. He found his brother-in-law Larry asleep on the couch. Larry woke up when he heard Bing come in. "The boys are upstairs, still sleeping. I didn't tell them yet. Thought you should." Bing nodded, went upstairs, stood outside Gary's door, took a breath, knocked. "Come in." Gary was sitting on his bed, fully dressed, like he'd been waiting. "Dad, is Mom?" "She's gone, son. I'm sorry." Gary didn't cry, just stared at his father, then said quietly, "You weren't there. I know. She died alone. I know. You should have been there." Bing had no defense, no excuse. Gary was right. He should have been there. "I'm sorry." Gary turned away, looked out the window. "Get out." Bing stood there for a moment, wanted to say something, anything that would make it better, but there was nothing to say. He left the room, went to tell the other boys. Each conversation was the same: shock, tears, and the unspoken accusation, "Where were you?" The funeral was held on November 5th, Holy Cross Cemetery, in Culver City. It was private, just family and a few close friends. Bing had insisted on that. No press, no photographers, no spectacle. Dixie deserved dignity in death, even if her life had been chaotic. The day was gray, cold for Los Angeles. Bing stood at the graveside, wearing a dark suit, his 4 sons beside him, Gary on his left, the twins and Lindsay on his right. They didn't hold hands, didn't touch, just stood there. 5 separate people united only by grief, and the woman in the casket. The priest spoke, said things about Dixie, about her love for her family, her faith, her strength. Bing barely heard any of it, just stared at the mahogany casket, thinking about the woman inside, the girl in the red dress who'd stolen his heart 23 years ago, the woman who'd given him 4 sons, the wife who died alone while he was singing for strangers. People approached after the service, offered condolences, said they were sorry. Bing nodded, said thank you, kept his face neutral, his voice steady. Nobody would see him break. Not here, not now. But inside, Bing Crosby was falling apart. He went home after the funeral. The house felt wrong, empty. Dixie had been sick for so long that she'd spent most of the last year in the hospital, but her presence had still been felt. Her clothes in the closet, her perfume on the dresser, her books by the bed. Now she was gone, and the house was just a building, not a home. The boys retreated to their rooms. Bing tried to talk to them, tried to connect, but they shut him out. Especially Gary. Gary wouldn't even look at his father. And Bing understood why. Gary had watched his mother suffer for 2 years, had been there when Bing wasn't, had held her hand when she was in pain, had heard her call for Bing in the middle of the night when the morphine wasn't enough and the fear was overwhelming. Gary had been the man of the house, at 16, because Bing had been on tour, on set, in the recording studio, somewhere else, anywhere else. Days passed, then weeks. Bing tried to return to normal, went back to work, had shows to do, contracts to fulfill, money to earn. The bills didn't stop just because Dixie died. If anything, they got worse. The funeral expenses, the medical bills that were still coming, the mortgage, the boys' school tuition. Life was expensive. Grief was a luxury Bing couldn't afford. But work felt different now. Standing on stage singing felt hollow. The songs that used to bring him joy now felt like lies. How could he sing about love and happiness when his wife had died alone, when his sons hated him, when he was drowning in guilt? He started drinking. Not heavily. Bing had never been a heavy drinker, had seen what alcohol had done to Dixie. But now he understood the appeal, the way a glass of scotch at night could quiet the thoughts, could blur the edges of the guilt, could make sleep possible. He'd pour a drink around midnight, sit in the living room alone. the house dark and silent, and he'd think about Dixie, about their marriage, about all the ways he'd failed her. He thought about the fights, God they'd fought so much, about money, about his career, about her drinking, about the fact that he was never home, never present, never there when she needed him. He remembered one fight in particular. He'd been away for 3 months filming a movie in Europe, came home to find Dixie drunk at 2 p.m. The house was a mess. The boys were with neighbors because Dixie had forgotten to pick them up from school. Bing had exploded. Rare for him. He kept his anger controlled usually, but that day he'd lost it. What the hell is wrong with you? You have 4 children who need you, and you're too drunk to function. Dixie had laughed. A bitter, broken sound. You want to know what's wrong with me? You are. You're what's wrong. You leave for months at a time, send money but not love. You're a stranger to your own sons, and I'm supposed to be okay with that, supposed to just smile and be the perfect wife waiting at home. I'm working, providing for this family. You're running from me, from this marriage, from the responsibility of being here, and I'm drowning. Can't you see that? I'm drowning and you're not even here to notice. Bing had wanted to deny it, wanted to defend himself, but he couldn't, because Dixie was right. He was running, using his career as an excuse to avoid the messy reality of a wife who was falling apart, and a marriage that was broken. Now sitting alone in the dark 4 years later, Bing wished he'd said something different that day, wished he'd held Dixie instead of yelling at her, wished he'd canceled the next tour and stayed home, wished he'd fought for her instead of fighting with her, but he hadn't, and now it was too late. The relationship with his sons continued to deteriorate. Gary barely spoke to him. The twins were angry but tried to hide it. Lindsay, the youngest, was confused, sad, kept asking when Mom was coming back even though he knew she wasn't. Bing didn't know how to be a father without Dixie. She'd been the parent, the one who knew when they had soccer games, who helped with homework, who tucked them in at night. Bing had been the distant figure who showed up occasionally with gifts and jokes but never stayed long enough to actually parent. Now he was supposed to do it alone, and he had no idea how. He hired help, a housekeeper, a nanny, people to do the things Dixie had done, but it wasn't the same. The boys knew they were being taken care of by employees, not family, not a parent who loved them. Bing threw himself into work, did more movies, more recordings, more tours, told himself he was doing it for the boys, to provide for them, to secure their future, but the truth was simpler and sadder. He was running, just like Dixie had said, running from the guilt, from the grief, from the responsibility of being present. Years passed. The boys grew up, got older, started having problems of their own. Gary dropped out of college, started drinking, history repeating. Dennis developed a stutter, anxiety. Philip became withdrawn, quiet. Lindsay tried to be the good son, the one who didn't cause problems, but inside he was breaking too. Bing saw what was happening, saw his sons struggling, but he didn't know how to help them, didn't know how to talk about what they'd been through, about losing their mother, about feeling abandoned by their father. So he didn't talk about it, didn't talk about Dixie at all. Her name became forbidden in the house, not explicitly, but implicitly. Bing couldn't handle hearing it, couldn't handle the memories, the guilt, the reminder that he'd failed her. The boys learned to avoid the topic, learned that mentioning Mom made Dad shut down, made him leave the room, made him disappear into work for weeks. In 1957, Bing remarried Catherine Grant, a young actress, 23 years old, 30 years younger than Bing. The boys hated her, not because of who she was, but because of what she represented. Their father moving on, replacing their mother, pretending the past didn't exist. Bing had 3 more children with Catherine: Harry, Mary Frances, Nathaniel, a new family, a second chance. He tried to be a better father this time, more present, more involved. But the damage with his first 4 sons was done. They were adults now, living their own lives, but the wounds remained. Gary started writing about his childhood, about his mother's alcoholism, about his father's absence, about the loneliness and the pain. He never published it, just kept journals, therapy through writing, trying to understand how his family had fallen apart. In those journals, Gary wrote about the night their mother died, about waking up and knowing something was wrong, about waiting for his father to come home, about the moment Bing told them she was gone, and the anger Gary had felt, still felt, would always feel. He wasn't there, he chose singing over her, over us, and I'll never forgive him for that. Dennis and Philip struggled with addiction, alcohol like their mother, pills, anything to numb the pain of a childhood spent watching their mother die and their father disappear. They'd get sober for a while, then relapse. The cycle Dixie had lived, now playing out in her sons. Lindsay tried to maintain a relationship with Bing, tried to be the bridge between his father and his brothers, but it was exhausting. Bing wouldn't talk about the past, wouldn't acknowledge his mistakes, wouldn't apologize, and the brothers needed that, needed to hear their father say, "I'm sorry, I should have been there, I failed you," but Bing never said it. Couldn't. His generation didn't apologize, didn't talk about feelings, didn't admit weakness. You just moved forward, kept working, kept providing. That was love. That was enough. Except it wasn't. In 1977, 25 years after Dixie died, Bing was on a golf course in Spain, about to die himself. His last days, and he still carried the guilt, still thought about November 1000, 1952. If he'd been there holding Dixie's hand when she died, if he'd chosen her over the tour, would it have changed anything? Would Dixie still have died? Of course, the cancer didn't care if Bing was there or not. But maybe Dixie would have died, knowing she wasn't alone, knowing her husband loved her enough to stay, knowing she mattered more than a paycheck. And maybe Bing wouldn't have spent 25 years carrying the weight of that guilt, wondering, regretting, wishing he could go back. But you can't go back. You can only live with the choices you made. And Bing Crosby lived with his choice every day for a quarter-century. When Bing died in 1977, his 4 sons from his first marriage didn't cry. They came to the funeral, stood respectfully, said the right things, but inside they felt relief more than grief. Their father was gone, the man who'd never been there, the man who'd chosen his career over his family, the man who'd let their mother die alone. Gary would eventually write a memoir, Going My Own Way, published in 1983. In it, he detailed the darkness of his childhood, the alcoholism, the abuse, the absence, the pain. He wrote about his mother's death, about his father's choice to stay on tour, about the resentment that had defined their relationship for 25 years. The book was controversial, painted Bing Crosby, America's beloved crooner, as a cold, distant, abusive father. Many people didn't believe it, defended Bing, said Gary was exaggerating, lying, trying to profit off his father's name. But the other brothers confirmed it. Dennis and Lindsay both said Gary's account was accurate. Philip didn't comment, was too broken by then, drowning in his own addictions. Both Dennis and Lindsay would eventually die by suicide. Lindsay in 1989. The pain of their childhood too much to bear. The legacy of Dixie's death and Bing's absence playing out in the most tragic way possible. Gary died in 1990, lung cancer. Like his mother. Before he died, he was asked if he'd forgiven his father. He thought about it for a long time, then said something that captured the complexity of their relationship. "I understand him better now. I understand the pressure he was under, the expectations, the need to provide. But understanding isn't the same as forgiving. He made a choice that night, chose the tour over being with Mom, and that choice defined everything that came after. For him, for us. You can't undo that. You can't go back. So no, I haven't forgiven him, but I've made peace with the fact that he did the best he could, and his best wasn't enough." That's the legacy of November 1st. The night Dixie Lee Crosby died while her husband was singing for strangers. The night that defined Bing Crosby's greatest regret. The night that destroyed his relationship with his sons. The night that proved you can be the most famous singer in the world and still fail at the things that actually matter. Bing Crosby recorded over 1,600 songs, sold over 500 million records, won an Academy Award, was one of the most successful entertainers of the 20th century. But none of that success could erase the guilt of not being there when Dixie died. None of it could repair his relationship with his sons. None of it could give him back the moment when he should have said no to the tour and stayed home. Success and failure, fame and regret. Bing had both in equal measure, and he carried both until the day he died. There's a recording from 1953, 1 year after Dixie's death. Bing was in the studio recording My Foolish Heart. It's a sad song, about love and loss and regret. Bing sings it beautifully, his voice smooth and controlled as always. But if you listen carefully, you can hear something underneath the polish, something raw, something broken. The engineers said Bing cried during that recording session, only time they ever saw him cry. He did one take, perfect technically, but emotionally devastating. Then he left the studio, didn't come back for a week. That recording exists. You can listen to it, and you can hear it. The grief, the guilt, the sound of a man singing about the foolish heart that lost the woman he loved. Not to another man, but to his own choices, his own priorities, his own failure to be there when it mattered most. That's Bing Crosby's real legacy. Not the songs, not the movies, not the fame, but the reminder that you can have everything and lose everything at the same time. That success means nothing if you fail the people who love you. That all the money and fame in the world can't buy back the moments you missed, the hands you didn't hold, the goodbyes you didn't get to say. November 1. Dixie Lee Crosby died at 5:45 p.m. at St. John's Hospital in Santa Monica, California. She was alone. The nurses said she called for Bing at the end, asked where he was, when he'd be there. They told her he was coming, that he'd be there soon. She died believing that. Died waiting for a husband who was 6 hours away singing on a stage in New York. Bing Crosby lived another 25 years. October 14, he died on a golf course in Spain. Sudden heart attack. He died quickly, didn't suffer, didn't have time to call for anyone, didn't die alone, but also didn't die surrounded by the people who mattered most. Some people say that's poetic justice, that Bing died the way he lived, quickly, on his own terms, surrounded by acquaintances instead of family. Others say it's just tragedy. Two people who loved each other but couldn't seem to save each other. Couldn't seem to bridge the gap between career and family, between ambition and presence. Either way, the story of Bing and Dixie is a reminder, a warning, that the most important moments in life are the small ones. The bedside vigils, the hand-holding, the I'm here when someone needs you. Those are the moments that define love, not the grand gestures, not the success, not the fame. Just being there, being present, being the person who shows up. Bing Crosby didn't show up, not when it mattered most, and he carried that regret for the rest of his life. Let it poison his relationships with his sons. Let it define his legacy in ways his music never could. That's the untold story. The one hidden behind the smile and the smooth voice and the Christmas specials. The story of a man who had everything except the one thing that actually mattered. The presence to be there when the people he loved needed him most. November 1, Dixie Lee Crosby died at 5:45 p.m. in a hospital bed in Santa Monica. She was 40 years old. She had ovarian cancer. She'd been dying for 2 years. And in her final moments she called for her husband, asked the nurses when he'd arrive. They told her he was coming. She died believing that. Died waiting. Bing Crosby was in New York, on stage, singing for strangers. He got the call an hour after she died. He chartered a plane, rushed home, but he was too late, 6 hours too late. His sons never forgave him. Gary wrote that he understood the pressure his father was under, the need to provide, the expectations of fame. But understanding isn't the same as forgiving. 2 of Bing's sons would later die by suicide. The trauma of watching their mother die while their father chose his career never healed. Bing lived another 25 years. Never talked about Dixie, never apologized to his sons, carried the guilt silently until the day he died in 25 years of regret, 25 years of wishing he'd made a different choice. Here's what this story teaches us. Success means nothing if you fail the people who love you. All the fame, all the money, all the achievements in the world can't buy back the moments you missed, the hands you didn't hold, the goodbyes you didn't get to say. Bing Crosby recorded over 1,600 songs, sold 500 million records, won an Academy Award, but none of that erased the fact that he wasn't there when his wife died. None of it repaired his relationship with his sons. None of it gave him back that moment. Who in your life needs you to be present? Not successful, not impressive, just there. Don't wait. Don't assume there will be another chance. Don't choose career over presence, because you can't undo missed moments. You can only live with the regret. Bing Crosby spent 25 years living with his. Don't make the same mistake. Subscribe to my story box for more untold stories about the cost of fame. Be present. Show up. That's the only success that actually matters.